Hello, my name is Michael Gash. I am the Principal Moderator for the Plastering Technicals qualification. This PowerPoint presentation has been produced to help standardise and support centres offering plastering technical qualifications. This presentation looks at last year's synoptic assignment, which is set at Level 2. The content of this session will provide an overview of last year's synoptic assignment, examples of a tool list and a method statement, typical type of photographic evidence, use of marking grid, centre forms, practical observation and candidate recording form, typical reminder of activities for internal standardisation, and City and Guilds resources and support links. The following slide will provide an overview of the assignment brief documentation content. Although the advice and guidance is based at Level 2, it will be very similar for Level 3. This slide explains more about the brief. The first paragraph is based on a scenario for rectifying defective internal and external surfaces. It also explains what work requires to be completed and carried out for Task 3 and for Task 4. This slide looks at the 2 classroom-based tasks to be completed under the supervision of your tutor. Task 1 is a proposal document for laying floor screeds, and Task 2 is a tool list and a completed method statement. This slide shows the drawing and technical information including dimensions for the internal plastering work. This slide shows the drawing for the external rendering work with typical information and dimensions. This slide looks at the way activities from Task 3 and Task 4 are scheduled and how they will run side by side to meet the set timeframes of the synoptic assignment. This slide identifies typical hand and power tools for installing plasterboard and beads, mixing and applying and finishing tool coat internal plastering work and tool coat external rendering work. Following slides are typical examples of information set out in a method statement. This particular slide focuses on handling and lifting and storage of plastering and rendering materials. This slide looks at the cutting area and the need for clear access and transportation. This slide looks at the type of access equipment that will be used for the internal and external rendering work. This slide focuses on the condition and use of tools and equipment, including maintenance. This slide focuses on the mixing area, tools and equipment, including resources, and carrying out the work in a safe manner. This slide explains the use of PPE and safe techniques to prepare and install and apply internal plastering work. This slide focuses on the external elements of the activity, including the use of PPE and safe working practices. This slide focuses on the need to ensure all areas are kept clean and correct disposal of waste is carried out. The following slide is an extract from the photographic evidence section of the brief. When taking photographs, they need to be sufficient quality to reflect the different stages of the candidate's work. Completed photographs need to contain a name and date for validation purposes. This slide explains about taking the photographs. For Task 3, for each candidate a minimum there should be 3 photographs of fixed sheet of plasterboard with fixings and correct positioning of thin coat beads to include the cutout of service box. Photograph 2, a floated background keyed cut back at the position of a 10mm stop bead. Photograph 3 will be of a troweled finished surface of both sides of the wall. For Task 4, For each candidate, a minimum there should be 3 photographs. Photograph 1, bell beads fixed level to the correct dimensions. Photograph 2, applied and keyed scratch go. And photograph 3, a consolidated render surface including a hard angle. The following link will give further details of the requirements for uploading evidence. This slide is a recap of the key points. It is important that you make sure that you check and comply with the synoptic documentation. Poorly labelled and poor quality of photographs can affect judgment of the evidence.
This slide looks at the marking grid, and there are 5 assessment areas to consider when moderating and allocating marks. AO1 is used to record written evidence produced by the candidate for Task 1 and Task 2. AO2 is used to record if the candidate has understood the brief with regard to planning and completing both practical tasks within the allocated timeframes. AO3 used to record the candidate's practical ability, skills and techniques adopted when completing the synoptic task. AO4, this records how well the candidate uses knowledge and skill to problem solve technical implications with each practical task. AO5 looks at the detail of workmanship, perfecting each element of the work to receive subsequent application and follow-on trade.
The following slides look at the marking grid. Assessment Outcome 1. Has the candidate shown good recall of knowledge and understanding of the brief, drawing and specification? Has he planned each task correctly? Has he produced a detailed tool list and a method statement? Assessment Outcome 2. Do they understand the concepts and theories? Have they set up the correct tools, equipment and resources to ensure the tasks are completed methodically to set timeframes? Assessment Objective 3. Whilst carrying out the synoptic assignment, does the candidate show confidence in approach and completion of each task or phase? Do they display accurate techniques and skills? Is the work consistent and accurate? Assessment Outcome 4. How well has the candidate used their theory and skills to achieve the final outcome? Has the candidate planned and prepared and carried out the task using their knowledge and skill in a coherent manner? Assessment Outcome 5 focuses on attention to detail. Has the work been completed to the highest standard? Is the work accurate in detail and clean? Are the beads and angles sharp and true? Are the plastered and rendered surfaces flat and even? Are service boxes clean? Are there any obstacles for follow-on trades? This slide provides guidance and marking and recording information. Please refer to the Technical Qualifications Marking and Moderation Centre Guidance documents for further information on gathering evidence suitable for marking and moderation and using the marking grid forms. The Practical Observation Form PO is used to record descriptive information and evidence of candidates' performance during an observation. Although descriptions of the quality and performance should support decisions against the EAOs, the notes should follow the flow of the observation rather than attempting to assign evidence against the EAOs at this point. The Candidate Record Form CRF is used to record details of any guidance and level of prompting the candidate has received during the assessment period. Rough notes bring together relevant evidence from across tasks during marking, a summary of justifications when holistically coming to an overall judgment of the mark. For further information on detail and marking, follow the link below. To summarise the key points on marking and moderating, writing should be legible and scanned in a logical order. PO forms should be descriptive notes of the quality and practical skills seen. They should be differentiating and give sufficient detail to enable a moderator to see how well the candidate performed. The marking grid should be used as a reference tool when making judgments in practicals. Remember that marks are awarded only when all tasks have been submitted. PO notes which describe similar performances should be given similar marks. Candidates can perform differently to expectations. The PO notes should not refer to what the candidate is usually able to do. They should only refer to what they did on the day. Candidates can also perform differently on different days, so PO notes should encompass the mixed range of abilities within the tasks. If they did well with the applying and preparing of base coats or fixing of beads, and less well with applying and forming finished surfaces, this should show up and will affect their overall marks. Remember, the evidence has to be reviewed by someone who may not have seen the assessment and who is not familiar with the centred approach of the learner. It needs to be completely clear, coherent and comprehensive. The following slide is a typical example of a detailed practical observation form relating to task 3. It's focusing on the use of tools and equipment, setting up of the work area and methods and techniques displayed to complete each activity within each task. This slide looks at further guidance. It is good practice to take notes continuously when candidates are carrying out the tasks rather than at the end of the day. The PO form a critical piece of evidence that the sense observer produces during the practical performance. This, if completed well, will bring the performance to life. As you know, the moderator will not be present during all the practical, so it's important that this document is as descriptive as possible. Observers should describe how well the candidate performed against each assessment objective. The band descriptors should be used as a guide when marking comments, but should not be copied word for word. This helps the marker moderator to allocate suitable marks. These forms could be handwritten or completed electronically. This slide looks at what could have been improved. Materials were not mixed to the correct amount and consistency, affecting the application and finish. Plasterboard cut and fixed out of position. Service outlets cut out in incorrect position with drawing dimensions. Plasterboard fixings were slightly out of line and not fully penetrated through the plasterboard surface. Thin beads were measured slightly short to the set dimensions. Rake of bead was not correct. Some steps were in the thin coat beads where they met at corners. Standard stop bead fixed slightly out of plumb. Floating coat applied and ruled but not square. Backing coat applied, ruled, consolidated and keyed but was not cut back. Finishing plaster applied adequately with some surface defect and unevenness. Angles and beads were not clean and sharp. Bell beads fixed slightly out of level with gaps at external miters, and the scratch coat applied and adequately keyed. This slide is a good detailed example of a completed candidate recording form, CRF, with allocated marks for assessment outcome 1, 3 and 5. When completing the CRF, it is important to show what went well by including detailed justifications for awarded marks. This slide provides information on internal standardisation with some good examples of standardisation activities that need to be carried out. This slide shows some support links for City and Guilds supporting resources. It also shows qualification reports for Level 2 Level 3 data results for synoptic and theory examinations which pinpoint any areas of concern for future preparation and assessment planning. Thank you for listening, and I hope it will be supportive.